Welcome in, folks. Chris Temple from the National Investor, and we're continuing to count the days and shortly the hours before we get to Strategic Investment Insights 2022, which is going to be held May 6th and 7th at the Lincolnshire Marriott outside Chicago. If you've not already registered, make sure you do so. Even if you can't make it in person, register. You will be able to get our panel discussions, the program, all the companies involved, and so forth. And one of the panel discussions where we have an especially special guest this year on Friday night is Konni Harrison joining me on the screen here right now. Hi, Konni.
Hi, Chris. It's great to see you again, albeit all those years ago.
Yeah, a lot of you folks have met Konni. More of you who are old hands at what we used to call the Chicago Resource Expo, fondly and lovingly, as we all do, remember her dad, Clyde, who is here on the screen next to the founder of the Chicago Resource Expo, Rich Redez. Clyde is there closest to Rich. And your dad and you were involved in the resource industry a while back. We're going to get into that a little bit before we get into what you're doing today. But you're going to bring something really interesting to the table that I'm going to be really anxious to get into. Clyde was a great resource to all of us. You have been. A lot of people have not kept up with you since your dad passed, but that's going to change starting next weekend. And, we hope it'll become a permanent thing. You got a lot to offer. So, Konni, first of all, tell us a little bit about your background. I know you started working with your dad some years back in the resource industry, and you were also pivotal with him in coming up with the Rogers Raw Material Fund Index. Was that a mutual fund, if I remember?
No, it was not a mutual fund. It was a limited partnership.
That's right.
But my father worked on the CBOE for 100 years, so he would bring people to the house, and so I was very fortunate to be surrounded by forward thinkers and thought leaders and disruptors and how to make life better for people. So I was very fortunate. And when he approached me, it was after my mother passed away, and he approached me, I guess it was in 98, 99. I don't know, that's a guess. Mm-hmm. And he said, you have to get your securities licenses. You need to be involved with this. And I said, I don't want to get my security. What are you talking about? I'm busy. And anyway, so I ended up getting my securities licenses, and he was partners with Jimmy Rogers at the time. And we launched the Rogers Raw Materials Funds, which was based off of the Rogers International Commodity Index that Jim Rogers had created. So it was great. There was 5 of us that launched it, and we had a ball. And I was the go-to person, and Dad was the big picture. I was the details behind it. So I got to know all of the principals of the brokerage firms and custodians and compliance and the clients. It was a great run. It was a great one. We had a lot of fun. Well,
I remember those days, not only all the security stuff and compliance and things, because I used to be in the retail industry too, as we've shared, but that was a pretty good time to start that particular index, because we were at the bottom of what had been a secular bear market for commodities for so long. So, going into the aughts, as we call them, the 2000 to 2008 time frame especially was really salad days for commodities. But then, as time went on, Konni, you decided to leave the industry. As you and I were visiting the other day, we've had a similar experience in realizing when you got to a point that that Wall Street, the financial industry, even if you specialize in certain things, first and foremost, it's almost like the government. It's there to protect itself, and then the people come second. And you came to that realization that you were limited in what you wanted to do for people by the strictures of the industry and their norms and regulations and all that. And so you started your own firm, which I found fascinating when I started doing more homework on it after all this time, because you really are all about the human interest in things. And I think that's important for a reason that Eric Redez and I talked about the other day that I'll get to in a second. But first, tell us what your epiphany or whatever it was that caused you to say, you know what, I can do better for people. Here's what I want to do.
Well, it's funny because at the time when Rogers launched, you did not need a brokerage firm to go through. You could buy it directly from the management company. And as I got to develop some pretty solid relationships with the investors and the people coming into the fund itself, they would come to me and say, I'm having trouble with this or that, or this brokerage firm, or something's going on. We need your help. And you can't, right? That's selling away. That's, you know, you're crossing lines back in those days. So I started KMH Unlimited. Of course, I had to get another license to help the people that needed help in other areas, whether it was conversations with their brokers or whether they wanted to do this or that or something like that. With that, with the KMH Unlimited, I could insert myself and represent them. And I loved that, absolutely loved that. As time went on, and we, of course, Dad and I went through a variety of other things as well. But as time went on, and it must have been, for all of your insurance people out there, I apologize, but when the insurance industry all of a sudden could do investments, I'm going, well, wait a minute, how did they know anything? And at that time, that's when the industry scrunched, right? That's when it became very, well, you can sell this, but you can't sell this. And we want you to sell this. And we need our quotas. And I'm going, wait a minute, wait, time out, time out, time out. That's not what this is all about. This is about people's money and their futures and getting excited about what they're investing in and being a part of new companies and new adventures. And I just thought, no, I can't. So I let my licenses lapse back in 2015. And I just never went back to it. And my company had morphed into, I was doing financial concierge for a while, and people would come to me when they were unhappy with their brokers or needed a change because they didn't know the questions to ask. You know, sometimes the investment world and the brokerage business, or the financial advisor business, excuse me, would talk above them and over their heads. And I was never a proponent of that by any stretch of the imagination. So I started introducing people to a variety of financial advisors to work with. And the financial advisors, some loved me, some didn't like me at all. But I would narrow it down and take the clients in, and we would sit across the desk, and, you know, I would run interference when necessary. And then the clients and I would go out and say, okay, which one did you like best? Which one do you think you can work with? And that's how they got to connect with the financial advisors and that piece of the industry that was really a good fit for them. You know, it has nothing to do with the brokerage business, and it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with them. And it was a great run. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Nice. You know, and kind of springboarding off of that just a little bit, Connie, and then you and I were spending some time the other day in conversation, you know, and I've referred to this a couple of times in the recent past, but it was astonishing to me in a way, but then again, in a way not, I suppose, to hear the news of this big ETF conference down in the Miami area the week before Easter. And the reporter on the scene, his characterization of the most elite 2,000 some odd registered investment advisors on the planet, supposedly, that were at this thing, is they're terrified. That was this reporter's words. We've got a lot of changes going on in the world. We've got inflation like we haven't had in 40 years, little prospect for it to diminish very much. In some ways, it's going to get worse because of a lot of other global trends. And so one of the other things I found interesting in looking at your website and what you do that I think is going to become dramatically more important now with this changing world, forget investment advisors, you know, what about Joe Sixpack and Sally Soccer Mom and Uncle Fred and Aunt Martha and et cetera? You know, this is overwhelming to people now. It always was, but now with all these changes in the markets and the economy, it's more so. So you have an element where you like to add the human touch as you're a counselor to people, make this maybe a little bit less onerous, less oppressive, less overwhelming, and more understandable, and give people kind of a disposition, for lack of a better way, as to how to be able to manage their finances in a really dopey time that's going to get more so.
Yes, you know, it's funny because people have tried to get me back into the financial advisor space. And, well, we're going to give you the moon and the stars if you just go get your licenses again. And my big problem was, it was, to your point, it was vastly morphing into the people that the clients are talking to are not the ones that are thinking, right? You fill out a little form, and it's a suitability form, and then they stick you with a variety of money managers. You rarely even know who's running your money. And, to your point, I don't blame that conference for being terrified, because if these guys have to think outside of the box, they're going to panic because they've never learned to do that. And it's not their fault, but you just can't. You have to be able to know your audience and have those conversations with people and explain to them exactly what's going on. Not
They're
just
institutionalized, aren't they?
Yes, a little bit. And, expand that out a little bit, and you have financial advisors. And sometimes that's all people need, but sometimes people don't understand the jargon and the narrative, and it just doesn't have to be that way. You can have a conversation and know what they're talking about. So that's fun for me.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I can tell it is. I can tell you're passionate about it, and I know that's going to come through to our audience. I'm greatly looking forward to this because, again, as you and I were discussing the other day, it's one thing to mash all these data points and theories and whatnot together. It's another thing as a human being to be able to get your head around it and understand it and be comfortable with what you're doing. And I'm happy you're going to bring that to the table. I know Rich and Eric are. So, Konni, thanks for taking a few minutes today in advance of the conference to give us a little introduction, and folks, a lot more is on tap from Konni and the rest of us in about 10 more days. So make sure you don't miss it. Here again on the screen is the logo, the website. Go there and register if you haven't already, and we'll look forward to seeing you shortly. Yes, Konni.
Well, there's also, when you're talking about the human element right now, the next generation is all about giving back. And I think it's important that people find that passion with impact investments and disruptor investments that will make that impact. Now, I personally, on a very personal note, not only have I been involved with the thoroughbred racehorses for decades and decades in the equine industry since I was little, but I have a shepherd mix. She and I are a nationally registered animal therapy team, and we go around and we go to hospitals and schools and events, and our sole job is to make people smile. And I think that's another element that's missing. Let's get people excited about what they're doing and smiling and asking the questions that they want to ask, not terrified because of what they think that they should know or should not know. So, so that's just a very personal note from me. So thank you for letting me take the time.
Oh, no problem. And that's important too, because it's one thing to build wealth. It's another thing to be able to not only live off of it, but to do well with it. And that is one more thing you do bring to the table. I'm glad that you pointed that out. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about all of this when we see one another. So thanks again, Konni. I look forward to seeing you pretty quick.
All right. Come on, guys. Come on out. It's going to be a great event. It's post-pandemic. Let's get out into the human world.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks.